I love a slow burn. I love to get to like 150 pages in and then I'm screaming because they've brushed hands and the tension has been building.
I like to be edged while reading,
Mhm.
basically. Sometimes less
Exactly.
is more.
Cindy's speaking my language. All of these are great recs. I can't wait to read all of these books.
Hello, hello. I'm Brittany Luce, and you're listening to It's Been a Minute from NPR, a show about what's going on in culture and why it doesn't happen by accident. Every year on It's Been a Minute, we dedicate an episode to summer book recommendations. From the poolside to the airlines, we have something that can get you through any summer day. This year, I'm joined by Sasha Bonét, author of The Waterbearers, and Cindy Pham, author of The Secret World of Briar. Sasha and Cindy gave me some absolutely juicy recommendations, and I am so excited for you all to hear them. Let's get into it. Oh my God, we're so happy to have you both. This is one of my favorite episodes to record all year. We are going to be talking about summer books, and I am so happy to have both of you here to talk about that with us. And we are going to get to our sizzling summer book recommendations in a moment. But first, I want to talk about your books. Sasha, I have to say, you wrote one of my favorite books. I got it right here next to me. Hold on. You wrote one of my favorite books of 2025. Let me actually just make sure I got it in the picture with me. Okay. The Waterbearers. I loved this book.
Thank you.
I want to give you the opportunity to talk to our listeners about it. Tell us about The Waterbearers.
Thank you so much, Brittany. I'm so happy to be here. The Water Bears is essentially a book about family. I wanted to write about the experiences of Black women in America, and the only way I really knew how to do that was to write through my family, these women I'm close to, and kind of
Mm-hmm.
expand through them to understand the history of this country. And I didn't really want to write about motherhood, but I kept being drawn back to it in my research in the archives. And I essentially discovered that this was the primary and an essential role of Black women in this nation from the beginning of the empire was to
Hmm.
reproduce and kind of mother and nurture. And we still see that today, but I was like, okay, I'm going to write through my grandmother and my mother and myself and try to understand how to disentangle all this beauty from all this harm that's cultural
Mm.
as I'm raising my
Love
own
that.
daughter. So I think, when you have a kid, you start thinking about your own history and you kind of need to reach back to understand how to move forward. So that's how this book narratively grew.
I mean, honestly, like I said, it's an astonishing read. I mean, the writing is beautiful. But what you hit on there, just trying to understand the whole through your individual story, that's how it felt reading the book. Your story made me reflect on my own and my mother's and her mother's. And I think that anybody with any kind of relationship to any kind of mother figure
Yeah.
will really get a lot out of reading this book. And I'm so excited to have you on the show today to talk about books in general. But yeah, I mean, I highly recommend The Water Bears. I really enjoyed it.
Thank you.
And Cindy, you got a book out this summer. I mean, as of the time that this episode will be coming out, I mean, your book will be out like today. It's like out in the world.
Yeah.
Congratulations, congratulations. And I love the premise of your book. I don't want to spoil it, but I'd love to give you the opportunity to tell our, I guess, viewers and listeners about your new book.
Yeah, thank you so much. So, my book coming out is called The Secret World of Briar. It's a young adult fantasy that follows a thief who is in search of her sister that went missing after she ran away to find the sleeping princess in hopes of a better life. And the two of them uncover a hidden portal inside Sleeping Beauty's dreams. And the story was basically inspired by this recurring wish I've had since I was a kid, which was that
Mm-hmm.
I wished I could fall asleep forever and never wake up. And I didn't realize at the time that it was, a form of like depression and passive suicidal ideation. But I realized that it
Mm-hmm.
was a really interesting allegory for Sleeping Beauty because I wondered, what if Sleeping Beauty had wanted to sleep forever as well? And what if the curse, what if it wasn't a curse, but some respite from depression and grief? And so the ideas just spiraled from there. And now there's a young adult fantasy coming out that I see it as a way of like honoring my depressed, angsty teenage self that, didn't quite know what to make of her mental health journey at the time.
Mm.
But I just hope it helps others, especially young girls, feel less alone.
I love that. Again, writing from your own personal experience as a way to understand yourself, but also to kind of, in a way, help other young people be able to understand their own feelings. I think that's beautiful.
I can't wait
Yeah,
to
it was
read that,
very.
Cindy.
Oh, thank you. I can't wait to read your book too, Sasha. I feel like motherhood is such a universal theme to come across, and
Mm.
it has so many like emotional, different nuances too. So I can't wait to read yours.
I mean, obviously, you're both beautiful writers, but you're also both very good and voracious readers. I'm so excited to have you all here to talk about summer books 2026. So, I mean, you each have brought, um, some books that you want to recommend to us. Before we get into that, like, talk to me about what makes a good summer read. Like, what makes a good summer book in your opinion?
What I like to do actually is to, when I'm traveling in the summer, read a book that's based in that place. And it kind
I
of
love that.
opens up the experience of where you are and you feel much more
Yes.
immersed in it, especially if it's historical. You kind of understand what's happening around you in a different way. So I love that. I also love to read about love in the summer because usually it's like flirty and sexy and you're meeting people, you're on the beach, your skin is out. And so I love to also read about love in the summer, which feels like a way to make me feel more free to talk to people, to talk to cuties.
I love that. I love that summer energy. What about you, Cindy? What makes a good summer book for you?
Yeah, I also gravitate towards stories that take place in the summer, and also covers are very like bright and cheery and have that kind of summer palette that you would see. But I also think that
Mm.
sometimes it can be more like intrinsic. Like sometimes I gravitate towards stories that have themes that are applicable to like what I'm feeling right now.
To that point, you each have brought a few book recommendations for this summer that have that summer energy that we are talking about. What are some of, at least for this summer, the tried and true books that you would recommend for a summer day? Sasha, we'll start with you.
My first recommendation is by Jira Asim. It's called 99 Problems Finding the One, and the subtitle is A Love Story, Sort of. And, I
Mm.
love nonfiction because why do we need to make up things this? The world is so crazy. And it's essentially from the perspective of Jira, who's this kind of 30 something man dating. And it really talks about how challenging it is to date in this climate. But from the man's perspective, he's like this hopeless romantic who is searching for love. When we really never get that storyline. And I talk with my girlfriends all the
Never.
time about like, we're swiping, what's wrong with these men? Like, why is it like this? And then to hear the male perspective in the ways that women are also kind of contributing to this pessimism, this pessimism around love. It's super
Yeah.
interesting. And his parents have been together for like 40 years or something. So he feels this
So that
pressure.
pressure weighs on you.
Exactly. You're
Yeah.
approaching 40, you don't have kids, you're not married, and you feel like, oh, what's wrong with me? And so kind of he's navigating, talking about his different dating relationships and how challenging it is in this time of technology to try to find love, and how we're looking on the internet and seeing everyone else and comparing ourselves, and the way that our fantasies are built now when you can have these excess of swipes. It's super
Yeah.
interesting. So I really recommend that one. And that one I think doesn't come out until August, but I read an advance copy and I was like, this is the perfect summer read.
I am excited to check that one out. Thank you so much for your first rec. And Cindy, lay it on us. What is your first recommendation?
Yeah, so I was thinking about what were the recent great books I've read this past month that are most applicable to summer. And I think this is the most direct. It's Sunburn by Chloe Michelle Howard. And this is a
Mm.
book that is a queer coming of age novel set in early 1990s rural Ireland. And it basically focuses on this first love between these two teenage best friends who live in a conservative Catholic community. And so I definitely felt so much of the coming of age themes from here, especially with how intense this first love was. The story explores a lot of themes about identity and desire. And because of the setting that it takes place in, there's a lot of religious guilt and societal expectations that the two characters have, especially as the protagonist is navigating her sexuality and trying to figure out, how to decide between her regular life or what society expects her life to be and her true feelings for this other girl. And it felt so much like reading like the diary of a teenage girl and all of like her musings of life and her friend group and how she feels for this other girl. I feel like there was a lot of poignant prose, especially when you get to some of like the heartbreak parts of the story. Like you really feel it. It's one of those things where it's like you don't need to do this, but I can understand why you came to that conclusion or why you're making those decisions as like a teenage girl in a very difficult environment to be in. And it takes place during the summer, and she references a lot of like about like sunburn and like sunspots and kind of weaving that into sort of like her attraction to this other girl. So I think it definitely brings like the summer vibes here, and it gives some kind of like innocence and heartbreak to the idea of like a first love, especially a sapphic first love too, which I think can be very complex for a lot of the queer girls listening.
Especially, I mean, especially with the setting being in, this very Catholic community in Ireland in the early 90s. I mean, it's like so many more levels of complexity to the story too.
It's interesting for me to read this because, like my girlfriend came from a more religious background. And so it's been interesting learning about, the religious guilt aspect of like the LGBT community, especially because like
Yeah.
I didn't realize I was queer until I would say like 4 or 5 years ago. So like I feel like I'm catching up to a lot of great queer fiction out there.
I love the idea of a first summer love book
Yes.
recommendation.
Yes,
Something so sweet
exactly.
about it.
Yeah.
Yes, definitely.
My first recommendation is a little different than what you all have shared, but it actually touches on what something that you like to do that I also like to do, Sasha, when I'm traveling, which is read a book about the place that I am. And so I am going to recommend Horizontal Vertical, A City Called Mexico by Juan Villoro. So I recently returned from my first trip to Mexico City. I say my first trip because I went once and I'm like, I'm coming back a million times because I mean, it's such an incredible city in an incredible
Totally.
Country. I've been taking Spanish lessons. That's a whole other episode of the show. I've been taking my Spanish lessons for the past couple of years, so I got to practice a lot. But it's just such an incredible. I mean, people in America can get very caught up in thinking about America only and like how big everything or kind of comparing everything in scale to or rather thinking that America is sort of the center of the universe, especially people I think who live in New York City. And I love New York City, but it's very easy to mistake New York for the universe because it is so big. But one of the things that I loved about being in Mexico City is there's more than twice as many people in Mexico City as there are in New York City. There's like 8 or 9 million people here. It's such, I don't know. It just has everything. It's got like ancient culture. It's got just the most incredible history. I don't know, I had the time, the best cuisine, incredible people. I had the best time. But I wanted to read a book about Mexico City that was from the perspective of somebody who actually was from there. Because Juan Villoro has his start as like a journalist. He's now like a novelist and he's written a bunch of other books. But because he had to start as a journalist and also because he's a native of Mexico City, there's all of the sort of ephemera of a city and how it feels and like, I don't know, all of the like that sort of all the poetics that go into that. But there also is like reporting and history. If there's an area of the city that he's not that familiar with, he will basically detail to you all the visits that he ever made to that
Hmm.
area. Talk to his friends who are from there, have lived there for a long time, and then actually have someone that he knows who's from that area or is familiar with it go with him while he essentially goes on sort of like a reporting mission to understand it. But then also he'll take like a whole other sort of section of the book and talk about this lounge singer, this lounge singer who's like maybe in her 50s or 60s, who does this particular performance in a certain part of the city that attracts this really really diverse crowd and sort of why everybody wants to come and see her sing these beautiful emotional songs. He goes back to his childhood, part of which he spent in Koyakan, living next to a baker who, you know, would be up at the crack of dawn making bread. But also was kind of like a character sort of like in that part of town. He's also like a third generation Mexico City resident, and his daughter, he's also raised his daughter there. She's fourth generation. And so he has these ties and this knowledge of and this understanding of the city, while also having, I think, a lot of the humility that you have to have when you live in a really large city, which is that you could not possibly know every single corner. I enjoyed reading it like a little bit before I came. I read a lot while I was there, and then I finished it on the flight home. And I don't know, it made me feel like I had, I wouldn't say like some grasp, that might be too strong of a word, but it was such a great experience to be in this city that is so old, has so much culture, and has so much history, that almost felt like it was too big to kind of wrap my head around. It made me feel like at least I was able to reach out and touch it in a way that I don't know if I would have felt otherwise if I hadn't read this book. But like, the language is beautiful. He's a great writer. I don't know. I highly recommend it if you've been to Mexico City, if you're thinking about it, if you're just interested in the culture, or if you're headed that way. I would recommend picking up this book. I like reading it on the plane on the way home. It just made me fall in love with the city all over again. So
I can't wait to read that.
I love it when a setting is like its own character in the
Right.
story as well.
yes,
And it definitely sounds like that's the case. I actually plan on going to Mexico City with my college friends, like in New Year's. So this is a very
yes.
apt recommendation for me. It sounds so good.
Oh my gosh. All right. That's my first recommendation. But Sasha, what do you got for us? What's up next?
Just to piggyback off of what you said, I want to talk about Romance in Marseille, which is by Claude
Oh.
McKay. And I did a
Ooh.
similar thing where I went to Marseille for the first time. A friend recommended this book to me. I started reading it before, and then
Mhm.
while I finished reading it while I was there on the beach, laid out. It was so beautiful. So it starts in New York in this hospital room where the main character has had to have his legs amputated because he was hiding on the ship from Marseille to New York, and his legs get frostbitten, and he has to have them removed. So he then meets this
Wow.
attorney in the hospital who comes and says, you know, we can sue this company. And he's like, yeah, let's do that. And he gets this huge settlement. So he comes to New York in stowage, and he leaves kind of in luxury. And the reason why he had left Marseille is because he had
Hmm.
been heartbroken by this sex worker he had fallen in love with, who basically robbed him and left him. And so he was like, I'm going back to New York, broke and heartbroken. So he's like, okay, wait, I have some
Mhm.
money. I'm going back to Marseille with this money, and I'm going to try to get her back again. So then the sex worker is like, actually, I'll spend time with you for free. You know, she's like,
Hmm.
now I have time for you. And so he wrote this book in 1930, and it didn't get published until I think 2020. So it's written
Wow.
in a time that is the 30s in Marseille. He's Senegalese. He falls in love with this Moroccan sex worker who's also escaped her country. So it really has so many, it has love, it has betrayal, it has murder, you know, it has luxury. And it really is kind of getting at this way that we, consumerism and romance are so tightly linked. Um, the ways that we use it to manipulate people to care about us, and the ways that we feel we need it in order for people to care about us, and how they're so intertwined in a way that is really hard for us to disentangle today. And
Hmm.
it's and back then capitalism was really kind of taking off, you know. It wasn't what it is today. So it was kind of like a warning from the beginning. But it's a gorgeous book, and I'm so happy whoever published this book, thank you for finding it and digging it out of the crates.
Wow. Oh my gosh.
Drama.
I'm like running out. I'm like, I got as soon as we hang up, I'm like, I gotta go get this book. What? It's got
Right.
everything. Also, as soon as I'm like, I need to, I was already talking to my husband. I was like, we should go to Marseille. I have been
Yes.
saying this. It's just been on my spirit. I don't even really know what's there.
It's gorgeous.
Um,
It's a gorgeous
the
city.
sea, right?
The sea and the
And I'm
mountains, and
like,
that's why it's
and
special.
that's, and there we go. And so I'm like, okay, so now that's done. Check, check. Wow. Wow. I am ready to read that. I'm ready to read that. Oh my gosh. Cindy, what you got for us next? What's going on?
I would say for this next book recommendation, I was thinking about books that I love taking me to a different place, even like a different time period. And we talked a bit about how like sometimes the setting of a book can be its own character too. And for that, I would recommend When the Tides Held the Moon by Vanessa Vita Kelly. So this is a queer historical fantasy novel about a Puerto Rican blacksmith in 1910s New York City. And he is basically hired to build a tank for a sideshow happening in Coney Island. But the tank is actually for housing a merman that got captured by the guy that's running the sideshow. And this actually leads to him meeting the merman and having a love story between him and the merman. And they learn to they learn to be able to communicate with each other. But then there's also such like a cast of diverse characters of other people who are working at this sideshow. And Coney Island, historical Coney Island, is such like a big setting for this story, and it's basically like its own character here. I think the way that the author describes it clearly shows that she did so much research in not only like the history and location, but just what it was like to be like a Puerto Rican back in the 1910s and what it was like to immigrate to New York City. What was it like to have all of these dreams and feel like it doesn't quite match up to what you had hoped to be, especially with the way that you're treated as like an immigrant. And I feel like it was such a great way of blending historical fiction and romance with this otherworldly creature. I also really like romance that builds up gradually. And I feel like there were so many little moments between the blacksmith and the merman for them to even build up that trust with each other since they're different species, essentially. And I,
Yes. Species. Yeah.
Yes, and there were also really beautiful illustrations in the book too that were drawn by the author herself because she's both an artist and a writer, which I find to be unfair. I think you need to have just one talent and just save the like you gotta pick one and save the rest for like other people. But no, really, like I think she did such a great job of having like this found family cast and such a unique blend of historical fiction and a lot of like fun fantasy elements too. Even if you're not super into fantasy, I think this holds just like the right amount of like balance to enjoy the setting.
I love this. I love Puerto Rican history. I love learning about Puerto Rican history, especially New Yorkers, like Puerto Ricans who've been in New York for a long time. I mean, literally the world that you have just described, I'm like, I wouldn't have even thought of this. But I mean, I so want to read this. In fact, I'm not a huge fantasy person. I just have not read a succession of, I think, fantasy books that have clicked for me. But like this like historical angle up in here is like with the merman, with the circus, which low key, I used to not be really that into circus stuff. And then my husband watched like a 7-hour documentary about the history of the circus, which I was not interested in at first. And then after a while I was like, hold on, let's come back to this. I mean, the sideshow element, the fantasy, the merman, the New York City history, Coney Island. You've given me so many keywords right there that are lighting me up, Cindy.
This is what I wish. Like I would rather have movie producers adapt When the Tides Held the Moon than The Greatest Showman, because at least When the Tides Held the Moon showed more of like the exploitative nature of these sideshows, and it has a more like diverse cast that, in my opinion, shows their stories in a more sympathetic way compared to I don't know. I have very mixed feelings about the Greatest Showman and the ways that was depicted, but I feel like When the Tides Held the Moon had a much more like truly diverse representation of the characters.
Yeah, I mean, the circus was not sunshine and rainbows back in the day. That we know now for sure. P.T. Barnum, where is your soul? I don't know. I can't speak to that. But yeah, it wasn't all sunshine and rainbows at all, at all. Oh my gosh, I'm so pumped to read that. That is such that's such a it sounds like such a rich story and it's also such a beautiful love story. I also like a slow burn. I love a slow burn. I love to get to like 150 pages in and then I'm screaming because they've brushed hands and the tension has been building.
Me too.
That's always gonna get me every time. That's gonna get me every time.
I like to be edged while reading,
Mhm.
basically. So, sometimes less is more.
Yes.
I see you nodding vigorously, Sasha. Like, yes, yes, sometimes, sometimes.
Cindy's speaking my language. All of these are great recs. I can't wait to read all of these books.
Oh my gosh. All right, I got another recommendation, and this was going to shake the table a little bit. Okay. I'm going to recommend Famesick by Lena Dunham. Okay. So to be honest, I wasn't actually seeking this book out. Now, I love gossip. I love drama. At the end of the day, I love when somebody writes their celebrity memoir and they're actually naming names or at least giving you enough clues that you know exactly who they're talking about. So then I started hearing about, I mean, like, this is the thing. Like, I think that Lena Dunham's a fantastic writer, but, she's had some serious feelings as a public figure that have turned me off in some ways to that aspect of sort of her persona. But then I started hearing about, like, how supposedly she's referencing in her book a possible overstepping of boundaries between her ex-boyfriend Jack Antonoff and the singer Lord. And so I'm like, okay, then I'm listening. And love her or hate her, I mean, she's great at telling a story. She's a great writer. And all in all, she wrote a pretty good celebrity memoir. I mean, she, like I said, she names names. Oh my God, she goes into so much detail about all of her exes, which I enjoyed reading. She also details the breakdown and then eventual breakup of her relationship with her former creative partner Jenny Connor, and so there's a lot of stuff in there that's juicy. But even with all that, Famesick to me is at its strongest when Lena Dunham is unpacking her relationship to chronic illness
Mm.
and disability. As like during the height of her career thus far, she has lived with OCD, an eating disorder, drug addiction, endometriosis, and Ehlers-Danlos syndrome, which is like a condition that affects the body's connective tissues. And even when I thought she might have been a little bit dishonest with herself or with the reader, or a little evasive at other points, which I'll be honest, like, what celebrity memoir doesn't have that? If I were to write a book about my own life, people would read it and be like, girl, a couple pages, they'd be like, girl, you tripping. Okay, whatever. If that's what you want to think, right? I expect that to a certain degree with the celebrity memoir, but even in points where I was kind of like, in other parts of the book, all of her meditations on physical pain and the limits of her physical body were just unflinching and so illuminating. And how do I put this? I think a lot of the time, because we live in kind of such an ableist society, when people are dealing with disability, or chronic illness or chronic pain, they only will talk about it either at the end of their career, right? Or if it is in a way so quote unquote visible or considered very visible, or maybe they feel like it's more than what they can hide from the public, then they'll talk about it. Or if it is part of the reason why they became, rose to fame in the first place, then I think they'll talk about it. But otherwise, if people I think are dealing with chronic illness or disability that isn't as visible in the same way, for the sake of their career, they usually will keep it to themselves. I find it very interesting that she is still, in a height of her career, she's still experiencing a lot of success and chose to be so open about it and to really share what it felt like from her perspective, what it still feels like from her perspective. Yeah, I was really, really impressed with that. And I was very surprised by it.
This is kind of her this is her bread and butter, right? Like the idea of writing into the shame that people would typically carry. Like this is what I think really
Mm-hmm.
made her so special in her time is that she's able to
Yeah.
do that in a kind of Nora Ephron way and make it funny and make it light. And that's what I think really attracted people to her series was that, oh my God, she's saying all of these things that people
Yes.
typically wouldn't talk about that are shameful. And of course, I'm sure that comes with a lot of weight. But I think, yeah, it's interesting. I haven't heard that perspective on the book that you've just given, but that
Hmm.
fits her narrative throughout time.
Yeah, I think you hit the nail on the head. That's exactly right. She's kind of like writing into the shame. And I listened to it on audiobook too. So, I mean, during the juiciest
Is
parts,
it her
I felt
voice?
like I was like, yeah, yeah, you can, it's her voice. She's reading it.
Wow. I actually had no idea that the book talks so into detail about her chronic illness. And that actually compels me to pick it up as someone who doesn't typically read celebrity memoirs. And I'm not super familiar
Hmm.
with Lena Dunham. Like, I've seen Girls, but I feel like I wasn't as into it as other people were. And I don't follow her
Mm-hmm.
personal life, but I think I'm very fascinated by what you've described of her experience dealing with chronic illness. And I think that it, like, especially as someone who has put her appearance and public image in such a spotlight, having that
Hmm.
be transformed and change, and your relationship with your own body changing too, especially because from what I remember, like, Girls dealt with so much of her own insecurities and shame over her body, and with chronic illness,
Hmm.
that transforms your body a lot. And how do you grapple with that? So that's a very surprising element to me that I have not heard discussed before. So I'm definitely going to be checking that out as well.
Yeah, it's interesting that you both mentioned that it hasn't been discussed as much, but I think that has to do with sort of like the shame and invisibility of
Mm.
chronic illness and disability. I think it's like if it's not something that feels close to you or someone that you care a lot about, it might be something that you kind of glaze over in favor of sort of some of the other more salacious elements. But yeah, that element for me made it definitely worth reading. All right, one more round of recommendations. Sasha, what you got for us? Another recommendation.
I'm gonna go with Toni Morrison's Tar Baby. This
Hmm.
this one is one of her underrated books that people just really don't talk about enough, and it's actually perfect for the summer. It's not that long. It takes place in the Caribbean. It's the only book she has that takes place outside of the US, and it really happens at this pivotal time in her life, which we have all these Toni Morrison books coming out right now. So I think it's an interesting book
Mm-hmm.
because it comes out at this point where she finally is calling herself a writer. She's quitting her job at Random House and becoming full time. She's entering into her 50s. She's like, it's like this bridge of a book between Song of Solomon and Beloved, like living between these two titan of a book. And it takes place in the Caribbean, and it's really about class. And why I think it's important right now is because when she wrote it, and you mentioned something about the soul, Brittany, already. You mentioned
Mm-hmm.
about the Barnum. You said, "Where is your soul?" That is the
Yeah.
thesis of this book. She is basically like, you
Mm.
guys need to tend to your souls. And let me write this book that's set in the present time. It's not set in a historical time, which a lot of her books are. And she's really kind of trying to talk to um, how we need each other, how we have to connect with each other. And it has a major love story at the center, with this man who's homeless and this woman who's a supermodel, very fair skinned, traveling from Paris
Mm.
to the Caribbean. And she's living with this really wealthy family where her caretakers, her aunt and uncle, are the servants. They're the maid and the cook. And she's living there with this white family that's very wealthy, but they're so disconnected from themselves, and they're so kind of abusive to their children, to their child. And so it's the ways that abuse happens and we don't say anything. So like the servants are not saying anything about this abuse of the child, and the way that everyone
Mm-hmm.
becomes culpable in this pain that this child has to then go into the world with, because everyone's trying to just maintain their position. Well, I don't want to lose my job, or I want to make sure that I can continue to be this supermodel. And then this homeless man starts living in their house, and he really erupts the whole family. He disrupts them. The supermodel falls in love with him, but they can't really be together. They're trying to be together. They go back to New York where she has an apartment. And it's really about the ways that you can love someone wholly and it doesn't mean that that love can be actualized in a practical way. Um, and
Mm.
I feel like when you're reading books as a child, you have this fantasy, or when you're watching films, you're like, if I love someone and they love me, we're going to be together. And this book
You
really,
think that's it?
yeah, that's it. There's no complications, but there's so many
Mm-hmm.
complications when you start talking about class. And so this book is really it's about class and the ways that they can actually tether themselves. And he's like, how can you ever know me if you're only reading these magazines and not trying to understand where I come from? And she's like, you need to get it together and dream higher and want to go to Paris with me. And so there's a line at the end that says, this auntie says to him, to the homeless man that's in the book, she says, you need to forget about her. She's forgotten about her ancient properties. And I feel like
Mm.
that's the real center of the book, because the book is basically saying, stay connected to yourself, stay connected to your ancestry, stay connected to the powers that we're all born with, that we don't all have access to. And I will never stop telling people to read this book, because people don't read this Toni Morrison book as much, with all of her books. This one gets lost. So I definitely highly recommend this love story that's not requited, and it's really has a lot of drama, and it's just not like a lot of her books, but it still of course has that beauty and that magic. There's always this magical element. And it's actually based off of the folklore of Brer Rabbit. It's kind of based off of this
Oh, I never
story.
realized that.
Yeah, it's based off of the rabbit gets caught onto, and this was a
Mm-hmm.
story that her grandmother would tell her when she was cooking in the kitchen, and Toni Morrison's like sitting on the linoleum floor listening to these stories. And this was also the story that when her grandmother was dying, she sat at her bedside and would tell to her. She was sent into the
Oh,
room,
wow.
and her family was like, go in there and go in there and tell her story. And she would go in there and tell
Mm.
this story. So this book is like really kind of reaching back into that, while also telling us, hey, your soul is something that you need to tend to, which
Mm.
I think is good for us right
Mm.
now.
Very good for us right now.
We're
I think it's a
forgetting about
question a
that.
lot of people are grappling with.
I love what you said. Where
Yeah.
is your soul? What a question. It is so good. I'm taking
Ah,
that with me, and I'm going to post that.
I'm
Like,
taking that. I'm like, I didn't even know what I said. Cindy, recommendation from you. Give us another one.
Yes, so my next recommendation is a retelling, a fairy tale retelling, just because with my book, I've been in the mindset of fairy tale retellings these days. And a really great one that I've read this year is Lady Tremaine by Rachel Hochhauser. And this one retells the Cinderella story from the perspective of the stepmother, Lady Tremaine. And I was so pleasantly surprised to basically learn so much about her character. I think the best kind of retellings for me are ones that take from a source material that maybe didn't depict a character in a fully fleshed out way. Like the character in the source material was
Mm.
a bit more one note, or maybe was just there to serve for the role of a villain and not much else. And this was a book that really dove into her background story, and specifically the determination that she has to secure her daughter's futures in a world and setting where the options for women are very limited. And so this is a historical fiction that basically explores themes about motherhood and ambition and what it means to try to survive as a woman and as a mother, looking out for her daughters. And I felt like the depiction of her was so much more complex and sympathetic in a way that we didn't quite get from the
Mm-hmm.
source material. And it was very much like a feminist take on this classic tale. And I just loved the ways that like we really got into her head about all of the different stressors that she had been dealing with her family's financial situation and her husband's death, and then having to take care of her two daughters and now this new stepdaughter, and some of like the political aspects of trying to find a prince to marry off your daughters to have a financial future secured. And I also just really loved like the depiction of female ambition, which I think is often
Mm.
villainized a lot in stories. And I loved the
Yeah.
complexities of showing that, and that it's not quite within the binary of good versus evil. And I just thought it was a fantastic retelling overall. And I was very like immersed and excited about this new layer of showing the stepmother and tapping into, the themes of motherhood.
I love that. I love that. I love that. It's like, let's unpack the evil stepmother. I'm like, what was
Yes.
she going through?
And you know what? After reading that book, I'm like, yeah, Cinderella should have done her chores because Lady Tremaine has had to do it enough.
Stop.
You're like, actually, she could have done more. Actually, she could have
Exactly.
done more. All right. Well, I'm going to round it out with one last recommendation. So I'm recommending a book that if you're super into books, you probably heard of this book. You may have read it. But if you didn't get to read this one, or if this is a new title for you, oh my gosh, I am recommending this. The book is Audition by Katie Kitamura.
Mm.
To say too much about this book would be to spoil it. But it's actually a book from last year, 2025. And it's a novel about an aging actress whose world is like set off kilter by this lunch with this very handsome younger man. I really don't want to say much more than this. It's a book that kind of relies on you going in knowing as little as possible, but you'll kind of want to. It's also a story that kind of like sometimes turns in on itself or doubles. It has fractures and sort of mirror elements that I don't know. You kind of want to discuss. You kind of want to discover on your own. But also, I will say I'm not like selling you like a 1,000 page puzzle box. Like it's actually only, I think, about 200 pages. It's very easy to get through whether you're reading it physically or audiobook. I did both. And I read it first on a long flight last winter. Oh my gosh. And also too, I was just like, ooh. It's like, I don't know, it's kind of perfect for like, it's perfect for like airport reading, flight, on a beach, where you kind of want to get quickly absorbed in something. And kind of like you want a page turner that you don't feel like you have to sort of like make 500 pages of headway into. I have also been just like waiting with bated breath because there was a film adaptation announced. It's supposed to be directed by Lulu Wang, starring Lucy Liu, and also Charles Melton. So like, I'm sorry, just like imagine this. Like, do you see what I'm saying? Like, Lucy Liu is an aging, beautiful, like stage actress who's like, sort of having a comeback role of a lifetime. And she comes across this like enigmatic, hot, younger guy. They have a lunch. He shares something with her that completely turns her world upside down. Again, I'm not going to tell you what it is. You got to read the book.
Okay,
You
this
gotta
has been
read the
on my
book.
list. I have to read this.
Oh, you
Sold.
gotta
Sold.
you gotta read it. And also too, it's just like I really like books too where like you're just kind of like, I don't know, it has a touch of everything. Sometimes you're like, is this supernatural? Sometimes you're like, is my brain splitting in half? Like what's going on? Kind of like if you loved the movie Birth starring Nicole Kidman, then you're probably gonna like Audition. But yeah, it's like, I mean, it really breezes by. And yeah, just the story is great and the characterization is great. And being inside the mind of this woman, it's just such a fun place to be. And I really, really enjoyed this book. Highly recommend. Highly recommend.
Okay.
All right. Oh my gosh. You guys, we have had this fantastic conversation about all of these books. I got one last question. Is there any book that you have not read that's on your to be read list? Or what's your number one book on your to be read that you are planning on reading this summer? You can give us just the title, the author's name, and like a 1 sentence description. What are you about to get into?
I have so many to be reads.
I got one. I got
Okay,
one that I know
okay,
is to be
okay.
read. Okay. So I started this actually. I started this a couple months ago, but I've had other books for work that have knocked this like down the. And I'm also like looking at the corner of my eye of a stack of 4 books currently that are ahead of this book now. And this summer, okay, I started reading. Well, first of all, actually, no, me and my husband are really into Merchant Ivory films, so I started watching A Room with a View, like the movie with Helena Bonham Carter. I started watching it. And then I like really liked it so much in the first few minutes. And I was like, hold on. I remember how much I loved Howard's End. I said, hold on, I'm going to read this book. Okay, because I like E.M. Forster. So I was like, I'm going to read this book. So I got a used copy, started reading it, loved it. And like I said, got knocked down the list. There's now still 4 books ahead of it. However, I'm going to read this summer E.M. Forster's A Room with a View. It's like, an Edwardian novel about a young woman falling in love or meeting somebody to fall in love with on a vacation to Italy, like with her governess over the summer. Sign me up. Okay, I'm getting into that. So that's something that is to be read for me.
Okay, I have been wanting to read this book for a while.
Hmm.
It's called Homebodies by Timbe Dintonhurst. Did you read that one?
Yeah. I haven't read it.
Oh.
I haven't read it yet,
It's
but
just been
I
on
would
my
love to.
list, and
I
I
want
feel
to.
like this is a good one for me to read in the summer. And I've only heard good things about it, but it's about a woman who's living in New York, working at a magazine, ends up getting betrayed and fired and having to return to her hometown. One of those stories where you
Been
go
there.
home, you rediscover yourself, then you come back like this, and it's also like a lesbian love story happening as well. And
Hmm.
what happens when your world starts to crumble? What happens with your romantic life? This is the book that's on the top of my stack.
All right, the top of your stack. I love that. And Cindy, what is on the top of your stack?
I would say Burn the Sea by Mona Tawari. This is a historical fantasy that is South Asian inspired, and it reimagines the 16th century Portuguese attacks on South India through these fictional characters. And basically, the main character is thrust onto the throne and has to use her combat and political skills to defend her kingdom from invaders. And those invaders are depicted as these monstrous sea creatures. And I just love the ways that fantasy and history are tied together. And there seems to be like a
Mm.
strong female protagonist and political intrigue. And obviously, with the historical inspiration, there's going to be themes of colonialism. And
Yeah.
I believe this is the first book to be set up for either a duology or a series. So I'm just fascinated
Mm.
by what kind of world
Mm.
this author could make, especially one
Mm.
that, is South Asian inspired. I think that we
Yeah.
don't get to see that much from like non-white fantasies and like mainstream fiction. So I definitely want to
Hmm.
pick up more of those.
Wow, my gosh, girl, you are killing me with these
I know.
historical
I
novels.
know.
Like every single, every single plot, every single setting. Oh my God, they sound so good. All right, I'm gonna put those on my to be read as well.
I know.
You know what? Despite the stack in the corner of my eye, I know I'm gonna get through these books this summer. I know I'm gonna read some books that are for me this summer as well. But thank you both. I have so enjoyed this conversation, and now I have like a million more things to add to my to
I
be
know.
read
I
list.
know. The stack is
Thank you
getting
both.
taller. The stack is so much taller.
Stack
Thank you
is
guys.
getting
I can't
taller.
wait to read these books. Thank you. This was so fun.
Yeah, all these recommendations were so thoughtful, and a lot of them sounded very juicy as well. So I will be playing back this episode so I can expand my list.
This is what it's about. And you know what? And Sasha, when I book that plane ticket to Marseille, I am going to tell my husband it's because of you.
Okay.
I'm just
Yes.
letting you
Blame
know.
me. Blame
I'm just
me.
letting you know.
Blame me. I
You're going to
love
have to take the
that.
blame. You're going to have to take the blame. All right. Thank you both so much.
Bye.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Bye.
Bye. That was author Sasha Bonét of The Waterbearers and author Cindy Pham, who wrote The Secret World of Briar Rose. Both books are available right now wherever books are sold. Remember to hit the follow button on Spotify and to subscribe to NPR Podcasts on YouTube. See you soon.